Welcome back, this is Tucker. Let's talk weather. We have a new storm forming in the tropics, and we'll talk a lot about its chances at landfall. And we have falling temperatures this week, just how deep the chill is going to be. Good to see you guys again, and welcome in if you're new. I'm Tucker. I'm out here in Boston. A lot of you guys know I work on TV, but I love the weather, so I like sharing it with you off air here too. As always, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and if you have any personal weather questions, I got you there too. It's now meteorological fall as of September 1st, and you can see across the United States, well, it kind of looks like it, but we're going to talk about why it's really going to be like meteorological fall this week between hurricane risks and much colder weather. Let's dive into the forecast and talk about what's ahead. We're going to start with the tropics today, as our biggest news is that the next potential hurricane is already forming, and you can see it right here, this area shaded in red. Over the next 7 days, the National Hurricane Center giving this a 70% chance of development. That's a 70% chance it becomes a tropical storm and gets a name. And as you can see, this is forming in the main development region, as we say. It's on its way farther west, and of course, that is going to take it closer to our coastlines out here, and certainly they are in play. Of course, the Caribbean in play here too for potential impacts from this storm. So we're going to take the first half of this forecast to look at this guy. The second half, we're going to dive into that fall weather impacting the rest of the U.S. We're going to start by taking a look at the range of outcomes for this storm. And each of these red numbers you're seeing here indicate the center, or at least the possible location of the center of our storm system. And I'm going to start by moving this forward. We're going to move it out 5 days. So I'm going to take you to September 7th here. And what you can see is some of the brightening up here on our weather model. And as those colors get brighter, that tells you our storm's getting a bit stronger. Still a lot of agreement. It's going to be out in the middle of the Atlantic on September 7th. And by the way, guys, we talked about a 70% chance, that's the forecast from the National Hurricane Center, that this becomes a named storm. That's just for the next 7 days. I believe the chance this becomes a named storm is more like 90+%. It may just take a little more than a week to get there. But regardless, we're going to talk about what happens even more than a week out. So I'm going to continue to move this forward, and here's where things get a little more interesting. I'm taking you to September 10th right now. Still a lot of agreement. This storm is going to be in the Atlantic, but it is approaching the Lesser Antilles. It's getting closer to some of the Greater Antilles Islands as well, like Puerto Rico. And part of the reason it's staying so far south is you'll see here this high pressure system, which more recently has been trending stronger. And as it trends stronger, it works sort of like a bubble. And these low pressure systems, these storms, they don't like to go into the high pressure area. It's an area of higher resistance. So that's why this stays south. But September 10th is an important period of time because you're going to see the range of outcomes begin to diverge here. And as I push this forward more, you actually see some that continue moving west here and impact the Antilles Islands. And then we also have a cluster that begins to move farther north. So this is where things are going to be a little less predictable from this point forward. Now, one of the things that is a pretty strong signal is that we have a lot of hits, a lot of outcomes in which this becomes a hurricane. It's very likely this will be a strong storm. That's why we need to watch it closely. But exactly where it's heading is tough to answer right now. The good news is that if it does make the turn here and go north, it is quite likely that this high pressure system out here backs away and it gives the storm an exit route to the north and east instead of coming onto land. But we did see with Aaron that the storm, even though it didn't make landfall, came pretty close, and it did have impacts on the entire East Coast. So that's a possible outcome here, something we need to watch. Also worth noting, there is some hints of separate activity in the Gulf. And now you're looking at, by the way, September 14th, 15th. We're talking mid-month. We're a ways out. But the Gulf is showing some signs of life towards the middle of the month too. And these are both things that we will need to watch. I also want to let you guys know that if we take a look at the wind shear, which is bad for hurricanes, those red colors indicating where the shear is higher, you can see the East Coast will actually be somewhat protected as this storm begins to get a little bit closer because there will be high wind shear on the coastline. So if this storm were to begin to approach the East Coast, it's unlikely to stay very strong. Meanwhile, if it does continue moving west and it impacts some of the Caribbean, well, that's where things are going to be a little trickier because the wind shear is not as strong. It may end up being a pretty strong storm down there. So it's especially like we were talking about right around here. That's going to be September 9th, 10th. That will be a key in forecasting what happens and the impacts that result. This storm will be named Gabrielle once it develops, and of course I'll be tracking it every step of the way, so you'll want to subscribe here for the latest. But unlike many channels, I'm not ignoring the rest of you that don't live on the coastline, so let's jump into that fall weather forecast and talk about what's ahead for the rest. A lot of you seem to enjoy our air mass conversations because we can kind of explain what's going on in the big picture. So we're going to start with that here. And what I'm going to point out again is our area of higher pressure near Alaska. If you've been watching, you may remember high pressure spins clockwise, and it is the high pressure systems that are more or less in charge of our weather. And what that's going to do is it's going to filter some of this colder air in the Arctic down to the United States here. Keep an eye on those blue colors, especially as we get towards the middle of this week, and you can see it right off the bat. This air in the Arctic is actually more or less spilling into the United States here. And you're looking at the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, the 7th with those dark blue colors in here, continuing to keep us much colder than average. And believe it or not, this, guys, is the polar vortex at play. You hear about it in the winter usually, but in the fall, it can create cold weather too, just not sub-zero weather, at least not yet. I also want to give you a closer view of the air masses in the United States. And heading into this week, here we are looking at the 2nd and 3rd. We already have polar air in the eastern US. That's why it's felt really comfortable and cool. But we have Arctic air that moves in here, especially on the 3rd and 4th. And that's what those purple colors are indicating as they spill into the northern US. So it gets a whole nother degree, no pun intended, of cold. Now what you're seeing here as we move into the 5th and 6th is that colder air really taking over most of the central US. So it's going to be chilly. It's going to really feel like October, mid-October in many spots. And we even have frost and freeze potential across northern Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and even a chance for snow in Ontario in Canada. I'll also add, though, there will be some warm air that gets ahead of this air mass, so it's not going to be hot, but it will stay okay if you're right on the East Coast in terms of temperatures, pretty seasonable. But this colder air is going to broaden out and move east as we move into the 2nd week of September. You're looking at the 8th right here. As it broadens out, however, the depth of the cold gets diminished. The longer that Arctic air mass spends away from the Arctic, the more it begins to acclimate to the mid-latitudes. So it's not quite going to be an Arctic air mass by the 2nd week of September, and it may feel more like late September, but not mid-October like it does initially. Here we are, though, still looking at, September 10th, September 11th here. It's still going to be cooler than average for this portion of the United States, basically anything east of the Rockies, but eventually we are going to level out, and we won't get too deep into this forecast, but warm air is likely to return at least relative to average as we move into the 2nd half of the month. We'll talk about where it's going to rain as a result of this in a moment, but I do want to show you temperatures, and again, you can see that cooler air really settling in this week. A little snapshot of temps here as we take a look at Friday. This is the 5th. Still very warm in the southern U.S., at least as we get to the middle of this week. You got temps in the 90s, but meanwhile, you also have temps in the low 50s in the north central U.S., and of course, that's where our coldest air is going to be. And as I move this into next weekend and we see that cooler air move east, you'll eventually see temperatures drop across the eastern U.S. here. We're looking at Monday the 8th. And this is, of course, not super chilly, but we're in the 70s across most of the country here, and even in the upper 60s across a good chunk of the north, central, and eastern U.S. So again, very fall-like, but not quite as cold as the air mass initially is in the central U.S. Of course, when we get dynamic systems like this, you get rain as well. And you'll see here, we actually have rain and storms that form. Here's our low pressure system, and actually you can see that bow. You see that sort of bow of rain here? That's your cold front, and everything behind it, that's your cold air mass that's pushing the front forward. So knowing that's a front, watch what it does. You can kind of see it spin out. It begins to get to the eastern U.S., There could actually be some strong storms on Thursday across the Appalachian Mountains, and then eventually that front just sort of occludes, as we say, and everyone's will be in the cold air at that point. Other areas we're watching for some rain could be another system that brings some precip towards the second week of September, so might be rainy for college football in some places on Saturday, but as a whole, once the cooler air is in, this high pressure system is going to protect a lot of the country from any big storms. So I expect a generally dry week with some rain chances mixed in here or there. No big storms are showing up, at least not for the next 7 days, however. We're also bringing back our fall foliage tracker. I know a lot of you guys love this too. And what you're seeing is pretty much no color, but not none. And if I zoom in here, take a look at this. Deep in the Rocky Mountains at high elevation, we have low color. So it's something. There's your first taste of fall right there, okay? It is going to take some time for the color to really set in. We do have a forecast here. This is from Explore Fall, by the way. Explore Fall gives us a forecast, and what you can see is across a lot of the U.S., anywhere you're seeing the green colors, those are your October peak colors, and anywhere you're seeing the yellow and orange colors, those are your November peak colors. Maybe a bit of an early year for a good chunk of the country. Especially, I know the Northeast known for great color. We got to hope for some rain out there, or it might be a little bit of an early leaf drop. But looking pretty good across the north central U.S. We don't have any significant drought conditions. It's going to be cool and dry. That's great news for foliage. Not as great in the Rockies because we have a drought going on, but still, there's always pretty good color out there too. So just something we'll be tracking throughout the fall for you as well. And honestly, the weather this week is pretty darn quiet as a whole, so get outside and enjoy it before it really gets cold. Of course, if you have any questions, drop them in the comments. And you know we're always doing these regularly, so check back. You're going to get your hype-free forecast from me, and I'll see you right here next time.